Hello, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to this webinar on behalf of the TEFL org. My name is Carl. I am an EFL teacher. I am an EFL teacher trainer. I am an EFL examiner. And I have been lucky enough to have worked in many places around the world, including the place which is the topic of today's webinar, which is Japan. So konnichiwa if you are watching this because you want to go to Japan. So I'm going to talk a lot today about the country of Japan, basically. I was lucky enough to have worked there for about a year, and I'm going to give you some information on sort of different types of jobs you can get, maybe some locations, some talk about Japanese students, also talk a little bit about sort of the process of applying for jobs in Japan. So if this is the kind of thing you're interested in, then please do watch this webinar. We are a teacher training company. We help people to become EFL teachers. So if you want to know a bit more about our courses, anything like that, please do go on our website, TEFL.org. So this is a live webinar. I'm here in Northern Ireland, where I work generally remotely with some face-to-face work as well. And let me know wherever you are in the world. It's always good to see the locations where everyone is. Can see people saying hello already. Really good to see some people saying hello. Right, I'm going to just start off a little bit with a question for you guys, because I'd love to know a bit more about what you think about teaching in Japan. So first of all, what do you want to know about teaching in Japan? So I'm going to give you some information that I think is relevant. But if you have some specific question that you really want to know, please do put that in the chat. I will answer it, or if not, Alan, who is monitoring the chats, will answer it. I should say, if you're watching it on LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever it might be, whatever social media platform, if you put it in the chat, it comes up on my screen. And what worries or excites you about teaching there? So sort of, you heard anything that you think, oh, okay, that's sort of put me off going to Japan, or something like, yes, that really makes me want to go to Japan. Please also put that into the chat. Right, talk first of all a bit about my Japanese journey. I'm not going to talk about the airline that took me there, because that's a bit boring. But journey as in I don't know, like a pop idol type sense. How did I spend my time in becoming a teacher in Japan? So Japan was actually the third different country that I worked in. I had about 2 or 3 years teaching experience before I got to Japan. And I started working for a company called Westgate. They're still going now. Now, they are a company that offers sort of 3-4 month contracts in Japan. They sort of fly you in, then they fly you back. It's a really good way of getting into Japan for the first time. They're really good at sort of setting you up nice and easily. You get to work in universities, that kind of thing. They do work you hard. That's what I would say. And you've got to be a bit aware of that. But that worked pretty well for me. And I know quite a few people that work there who quite enjoyed it. And there I was teaching sort of conversation or general English classes in a university. So I would have students that would sort of have their own degree that they were doing in, I don't know, mathematics or business or whatever it might be, all the range of subjects. And they would come and see me and the other people I worked with for sort of a conversation class or a general English class in a university. Then I got work with the British Council. So I could have gone Westgate and done another term, sort of flown home, because Westgate sort of have this kind of strange policy where at the end of the term, you then fly home and then you spend a couple of months and then you fly back, sort of thing, or a couple of weeks. It's a bit bizarre, but that wasn't really for me. I just wanted to stay out in Japan. So I then got working with the British Council as an hourly paid teacher, where I worked in lots of different roles with them, doing a lot of different kind of jobs. And I then sort of, at that time in my life, I had a bit of a policy where I would only sort of spend a year in a country and then I'd move on, because the whole point of me becoming a TEFL teacher was so I could travel the world. So after about a year, I was like, okay, do you know what? I would love to stay in Japan, but I want to go and see somewhere else. So I actually moved to Sri Lanka and worked there as well. Now, during that time, there was the big earthquake in Tokyo with the Fukushima nuclear disaster, that kind of thing. So there was a lot going on, which did affect my time there, but I did really, really enjoy it. And I'm still in love with Japan. It's my favorite place that I've taught, favorite place I've lived in all the countries I've worked and lived in, and I would happily return. And I do think about it quite often. So that's my time in Japan. I can see people saying hello. Just going to get to a few people saying hello, just to let you all know that this is a live webinar. Hi, Elizabeth. Always lovely to see you in Western Canada. Avery's in. Hi, David's in. The big square guys in Lincolnshire. At the moment, the rain in the UK and Ireland is crazy. Corke, I hope I said that right, is in the Ivory Coast. David's put a couple of things in the chat. Great. Sonia's in Austria. Great. And there's a couple more questions and people in Toronto as well. Lovely. Right. So why Japan? Why do I sort of say to you about working in Japan? Right. First of all, it's got quite a strong global reputation for education. They take education quite seriously. The parents take education of their children seriously. The adults sort of want to learn as well. So there is quite a strong global reputation for education. And I think that works quite well as a teacher, especially for one of your first destinations. There's a high demand historically for teachers. You know, you're not going to find out one day that Japan is going to stop employing English teachers. You know, I've worked in countries where there's sort of the demand for teachers sort of goes with the economy. When their economy is booming, they employ lots of EFL teachers. When the economy is not booming, they don't employ lots of EFL teachers. But Japan isn't like that. You know, you're going to get a nice steady job. You're always going to get work there. There's quite a structured and organized visa process. You know, you haven't really got to worry about what visa you're on, how to get the visa. That's quite black and white. There's lots of people that have done that before. So again, if it's your first country, it can be quite a good place to go to. There's quite professional teaching environments. So, you know, if you want to learn a bit more on the job, if you want to do different kind of teaching, if you want to have like a manager who's going to give you some tips, that kind of thing works pretty well in Japan because the schools tend to be quite big. You're not really going to be the first teacher that's ever been in that town or for that company. So it is quite professional, and you do find that you learn quite a lot as a teacher there. And obviously, it's quite a safe and organized country. You know, crime rate is very, very low. The trains work really, really well. It's good to travel around. You know, it's a good place to spend some time if you want quite sort of, I don't know if relax is the word, because there's lots to do, and you know, living in a big city doesn't tend to be the most relaxing of places, and lots of jobs in Japan are big cities, but it tends to be quite an easy place to live. Right, so first we're going to talk a bit about the Japanese job requirements. So you do need to have a degree, and the reason why you need to have a degree to work there is to get the work visa. Obviously, you can travel there on a tourist visa, but you can't work on that. In order to get a work visa, you need to have a 3-year degree. And they might look at a 2-year degree. They'll look at a 4-year degree for sure. But you do need to have a degree to get a work visa there, apart from one situation, which I'm going to explain about in a minute. Now, you do need to have a 120-hour TEFL certificate minimum. Okay, there are more hours and you can do that. There are more advanced ones you can do, but 120 hours is seen as the minimum. Now, you don't legally need that to get the visa. To get the visa, you only need to have a degree, but companies will only really take you on if you have that 120-hour TEFL certificate. There are age limits in Japan in terms of the mandatory retirement age. Now, that sort of, it depends if you're a lady or a man, and that's basically when Japanese people themselves stop working. Now, there are ways around this, but you have to do your own research. You need to check it yourself. The first way would be to be self-employed over there. If you can somehow get a company to sponsor you for work visa, you go over there and work for them, and then maybe become self-employed. That might allow you to keep on working. The other problem with this age limit is that companies tend to, when you get to about 55 years old, tend to not look at you as sort of in as favorably as maybe a younger person, because they think that, because lots of people in Japan stay a long time and they're worried that if you get to the age of 60, what's going to happen? Okay, so just be aware. Now, there isn't like a legal requirement. You might find that companies still take you on, but you might also find that companies unfortunately say you're a bit old at the age of 60, which is crazy, because there's lots left in your life there, obviously. Now, you do need a clean criminal and a health check. Japan is really strict on the criminal check. If you've got any sort of criminal sort of crime on your record, it's probably going to put you off getting a work visa. Health check, they do check for TB if you've got that. They also check, I think, for HIV and AIDS. They also can, in some companies, and I've had this before, check you for drugs, so recreational drugs as well. So just be a bit careful on that. You need to have a proven English ability. Now, how the companies do this is very different. It also depends what type of visa the companies work on. So there's something like I think it's called a humanities visa and an education visa, and the requirements are different for that in order to get that visa. And right, how do you prove the English ability? There's a few different ways. First way, I think, is to prove that you have 12 years of education where the education was in English, in like an English speaking school. The second way is to prove that you've got a degree in an English speaking university. And then the third way, which isn't quite as common but can also work, is to have something like an IELTS, Trinity, Cambridge certificate to show that you have a high level of English at sort of C1 level or higher. Now, when you apply for jobs, you would need to prove your English ability. They will not take you for granted if you just say that. They might say, okay, I need to get a letter from your primary school, your senior school, your high school, which can be tricky. So just be aware of that. Okay. Right. The no degree option is something called a working holiday visa. Now, to get this, you have to be under the age of 30 and you have to be from specific countries. Now, in theory, all of these, any country can apply for the work visa, wherever you are in the world. Now, there is unfortunately a bit of a bias towards English-speaking countries, and if you have a British passport, an American passport, Canadian, and Australian, those sort of countries, they tend to have a bit of a bias towards them, unfortunately, and that comes from the companies. I'm not saying if you haven't got those passports, don't go, because you can definitely get in there, but just be aware that your passport, not you, might be holding you back there. Now, if you've got a working holiday visa, you don't need the degree, but you must be under 30 and you must be from quite specific countries. The number of countries that can get a working holiday visa is quite narrow compared to the general work visa. So have a look into that a bit more if you feel like that is more what you are aiming for. Right, where are the best places to teach? Well, not the best places. That's one. What are the types of opportunities there are in Japan? The one you might have heard of the most is called the JET program. I'm not going to go into lots of details about that. You can Google that yourself, but basically it's run by the government. They place you in schools around the country, not necessarily in Tokyo. You don't have much choice with that where you go. Then there's something called private language schools, Ikawa. Now that's a Japanese word for it. They are they're privately run businesses. You tend to sort of be able to say more where you want to go. The wage is generally a little bit lower than JET, but you do have a bit more options. You also would probably be teaching kids and also teaching adults. Or on the JET program, you're probably just teaching kids. Now, this is one that I don't know a huge amount about, but I've heard that it's really good for people who are really new to TEFL and want sort of their first EFL job. And I'm going to talk about a list of companies towards the end. But if you have a look at ALT, assistant language teacher, dispatch companies, they might be able to help you to get a job if it's your very first job. Now, international schools, if you are a qualified teacher, that's different from being a qualified TEFL teacher. If you've got something, that like allows you to teach in primary schools or senior schools in your own country in like a specific subject, for example. International schools are probably the way to go because you learn a bit more money. Then finally, there's opportunities in universities. However, working in universities in Japan as a full-time university lecturer or as a full-time university teacher can be very, very tricky to get in terms of you need quite a lot of qualifications. Right. Now, Tokyo, everyone thinks about Tokyo when they are going to Japan, but I want you to think about life outside Tokyo if you are going to go there. I went straight to Tokyo and I lived in Tokyo and I loved living in Tokyo, but it can be quite hectic. There's a lot of trains, a lot of transport, a lot of hours involved. If I go back again to work there, I'm definitely going to try to work outside Tokyo. So some research on the following is needed. Okay. So have a look at these cities here. You've got Osaka, Kyoto, Sapporo, Hiroshima, Nagoya. They are the main markets outside Tokyo, and there are lots of jobs available in them. These are big, big cities. Then there are other regional towns, and there are also rural placements. And these might be for you. They might not be for you. I'm going to talk a bit about why it's beneficial, I believe, to be outside Tokyo. First of all, lower rent and living costs. You know, wherever you are in the world, you know that there are cities in your country that are more expensive than others to live in. And Tokyo is a lot more expensive. And I'm going to talk a bit about the money in a minute, but there is a lot more expensive than other places. There's also a lot of different living costs, okay, that are associated, I think, with Tokyo because it's just generally a bit more expensive. If you're outside of Tokyo, there are a lot more different sort of access to accommodation. You will find that if you go to live in Tokyo, now when you go work for a company, they will probably sort out your accommodation for you, but they don't sometimes. Or sometimes they sort out your accommodation for 6 months or a year, and then you have to find your own accommodation. It can be expensive in Tokyo. It can be difficult in Tokyo. But living outside Tokyo, you will find that there is easier accommodation for you to get. There's also a really strong teaching demand outside Tokyo that isn't necessarily met by there's not enough people to go and teach there, basically, because everybody wants to go work in Tokyo. Because of that, there's less competition for jobs. So you might find that you can go work in somewhere like Nagoya, somewhere like Hiroshima, and you can get a more senior role. You can get more of a role that you want to do. You can maybe not work weekends, which you have to do in Tokyo, that kind of thing, because there's less competition for jobs. There's less people wanting to go there. And I also think this does depend on you. This last point, or this point, is integration. In Tokyo, there are a lot of people that speak English. You will be around a lot of British people, Irish people, American people, Australian people. You might, depends on you, you might fall into the trap or the enjoyment, if that's kind of what you want, of hanging around with English speaking people, which can cause you trouble integrating, can be quite more slower. If you go and work in Nagasaki or somewhere, you might find that you need to get more Japanese friends, and that might allow you to integrate. And so I think overall, this kind of leads to a better work-life balance from being outside Tokyo. Being in Tokyo can be quite tricky. So salary, contracts, and benefits. Now, this really does depend on the location. You're going to see higher wages in Tokyo than you are in Sapporo in the north or Osaka towards the south. So just be aware of that. Okay. It also depends on the job. Jet is probably going to pay a bit more than Aikawa or the ALT jobs. Universities will pay a lot more than Jet. Roughly, this is the sort of figure, 230,000 to 300,000 a month starting, depending on your qualifications, depending on how much experience you have. And you can live well on all of these wages. Even in Tokyo, you can. Now, you're not going to save a huge amount of money in Japan, but you are not, if you've got a wage somewhere like this, you're not going to find yourself poor, okay? Especially if they're paying for your accommodation and that kind of thing. Companies will help you with visa sponsorship. That can be quite tricky. You can't can't create your own work visa, you need a company to sponsor it for you. You will get paid holidays. They will give you health insurance, which is a requirement. So make sure that that is, you know, something that you're aware of. Sorry. They will also contribute into your pension. And lots of countries around the world for EFL teachers do not do that. So be aware of what will happen to that pension once you have, once you leave Japan. But obviously, if you're going to stay in Japan a long time, that can be quite useful. And there are really good contract renewal pathways in Japan, you know. So you can go work for another company. Then once you're there, you can change to another company. You could go and try and be self-employed. Getting yourself there is the main issue. You know, going to work for universities, going to work in senior teacher jobs because the companies are quite big. You know, that, you know, a bit of funding towards teacher training can be possible as well for you to get a higher qualification. There's lots of this kind of thing in Japan, which doesn't necessarily happen in other countries. So when to apply? So at the moment, because it's currently the 12th of February, you will see jobs being advertised that will sort of start in around April time. And the recruitment period for that is from sort of December to March. Can take a couple of months for your visa to come through. So that's why they sort of companies will start the recruitment a bit earlier. The next one after this is, and these are probably to start sort of in JET programs. This is to start in public schools, that kind of thing. Universities as well. The next would be to start in the autumn, and that generally happens from June to August to start in September. However, you might see jobs advertised now to start in the autumn because companies, if they've got lots of teachers, will want to have sort of a general conveyor belt of CVs coming in. But generally, this is how it works. Now, if you're going to go work for an Ikawa, the year-round private school hiring, they don't really have any periods. So you might find, because they don't really have terms, they just sort of have sort of 10-week classes or 10-week courses. They sometimes have one-on-one courses where they just need people for a couple of months. So they just need a teacher to teach that course for a couple of months. You'll be employed for a year, but you'll sort of maybe start in, I don't know, let's say November. And they sort of, then you have a course, one course you're doing for 8 weeks, another course you're doing for 10 weeks. You got a full timetable, but you might not have the students for that whole period that you're there. Right. What is the application process? Expect to get your CV and your certificate checked. They will contact companies that you put down on your CV. They will also check your certificate to make sure that it is legitimate. Expect lots of different online application forms. Japan loves a bit of admin. Expect to maybe do a demo lesson over Skype or Zoom before you get the job, or written teaching tasks. Okay. Now I've done webinars where I talk about application processes. These are worth watching. Multi-interviews. So don't generally expect, and this is the same pretty much for a lot of TEFL jobs nowadays, to have one interview. You might have an interview about your teaching with a teacher. Then you might have an interview about Japanese culture with one of the admin staff. Or you might just have one interview, but be prepared for multi-interviews. And also be prepared to go through lots of background checks in terms of your criminality status and also maybe your health status. And also there's a lot of visa administration. There's a lot of filling in forms. There's a lot of tasks you have to do to get that visa. Don't think, oh, why have they given me this? I'm not going to do this one. It's just life. You have to tick the boxes to get that visa in your passport. Japanese learners. Now, this will kind of help you with any sort of application you're doing or any interview. Here are the main issues that Japanese students have, okay? So, and you will be employed probably not because of your amazing grammatical knowledge. You will be employed to fix these things within learners. And a lot of these you will learn on your 120-hour TEFL certificate. But these are common problems that Japanese people have. And they are the sort of things, if I'm not going to tell you a solution to each of these, because each one of these is probably a 1-hour webinar. But if you go onto Google, you do some searching of each of these, how do I build Japanese speaking confidence? That will give you some lesson plans that will allow you to find some answers for that. But these kind of things, if you bring them up in interviews, say, and you're aware of these, they can help. And pronunciation difficulties. So first of all, I'd say watch our video we've done on teaching pronunciation. I've done this where I talk about for an hour on how to improve pronunciation, because how you would improve the pronunciation in Spanish people is the techniques are the same as Japanese people, but what is different is that the Japanese people have different pronunciation problems, and L and R is the big one. So, again, though, do a web search, you will find out information about this, but sort of mentioning these in your interview can also be helpful. There is a lot of L1 interference with Japanese people. Not issues, but the way that Japanese is naturally spoken is the pronunciation in terms of syllables and stress is different from English. And for Japanese people, it's hard. Okay, it's a very difficult thing to sort of forget about Japanese pronunciation situation and put that into English. Okay. Some classroom strategies, and do more research and mention these in interviews and applications, is how you want to build the confidence of students, how you want to build sort of an error tolerant classroom where it's okay to make errors. With your personality, the way you error correct is a good way. How you want to improve the speaking within the classes by having sort of some controlled speaking practices, speaking, get that into your interview. Repetition and drilling to help you with the pronunciation issues, being aware of the different phonemes, the difference between L and an R, how they sound and how they are produced in the mouth, and lots and lots of communicative activities where they speak in pairs, they speak in groups. Thank you for the questions. I'm definitely going to get to them. There's some really good ones there. Right. You need a little bit of cultural intelligence, I would say, in Japan, more than pretty much anywhere else that I've taught, for sure. Japanese society expect cultural norms. And even if they employ someone from London or they employ someone from New York, they don't really want to change their culture to fit in with yours. And why should they? You're the one going to Japan. So just have a bit of cultural intelligence. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to be professional. They have really, things like punctuality is really important in Japan, whereas it can be less important in other countries. The way you look, shirt and tie, that kind of thing. Tattoos not on show. If you've got long hair, have it tied up, that kind of thing is very important in Japan. You've got to learn to be a bit indirect with colleagues and especially with students. They don't react well to being told how to do something directly or what to do to improve. Okay, you've got to be a bit indirect with them and sort of, hint at something. You've got to be a bit indirect with the students by sort of giving them a chance to, don't say they're wrong, give them a chance through the error correcting to fix a mistake themselves. Learn some of the language. I think more in Japan than other countries. Now, you don't have to learn Japanese in order to teach there, but they do expect you to try and learn a bit of the language, and getting around can be tricky if you don't know any of the language. Think long term. Even if you're not going to be there for more than 3 or 4 months, don't let on to that with Japanese people. They sort of expect you to have a career path. So don't sort of say to them, do you know what, I'm going to be there for 3 or 4 months, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to go back to my other job, whatever that might be. Think long term and sort of say to them long term you're going to be working. They kind of expect that from their teachers. Right. What about your first month in Japan? Be prepared for a lot of cultural overload. It is quite different, I think, than any sort of country in the world. In terms of Korea might come close to it, but in terms of the way the people are, in terms of the food, in terms of the cities, I think it can be very different. You will be given a lot of information by your employers. They think they will give you books to read about your job. They will give you information. They will tell you lots of information. You will get emails if they're using an email system. When I was there, I sometimes got a fax, believe it or not, because it was a long time ago. You will get a lot of information. Now, you don't need to know every single thing, but you do need to be aware of this. Okay. Administration. There will be a lot of administration. You will be speaking to lots of different people. You will be speaking to lots of forms. So you have to be filling in lots of forms. You'll have to go through that kind of thing. The housing, the banking, and the visa process is quite interesting. How you do that one, how it works is probably quite different from how you have to how you would do it in your own country. Okay, so just go with the flow on that. How does it work? Follow the information, do exactly as you're told, and you will be fine. Workplace orientation, be prepared to sort of be told how to fit in, be told what to do, that kind of thing. Now, getting to the end now, before I sort of go through some of the final thoughts and also list some of the companies to work for. Japan is great for a TEFL career. It's one of the best places in the world if you want to have a complete career change. Now, TEFL is also great for just going to work somewhere for a year, but it's really good if you feel like long-term you want to go work as an EFL teacher. But they do expect you to have qualifications and keep building on your qualifications and Japanese ability. Your Japanese, if you want to get the high, well-paid EFL jobs at universities as a lecturer, that means you will probably have to pass a Japanese reading, writing, listening, speaking test. They expect that. Now, when you first go for your first jobs there, I didn't have any good level of Japanese. I definitely do not have a level of Japanese by the end of working there for a year to go and work in a high-level university. But if you're going to stay a long time, you really from day one start getting Japanese lessons, start to work towards even a master's, a PhD. That is expected. There are lots of leadership roles in different jobs in Japan if you stick with a company long enough, or if you apply for it. You will see jobs like teacher training. You will see jobs advertised such as senior teachers. There's curriculum development jobs, writing, that kind of writing resources, writing curriculums, that kind of thing is available over there. Teacher training, as I said, lots of different ways for you to do that. There's pathways into academia, into becoming a lecturer, that kind of thing exists. Research, that kind of thing exists really well in Japan, where it doesn't necessarily exist in other countries. There are also a big range of teaching. If you want to go teach kids, if you want to go teach adults, if you want to teach exam classes, if you want to teach business classes, that happens in Japan. It's a good place to go to do that. Right, some of the myths about teaching in Japan. You must speak Japanese. It's not true at all. I went there without a word of Japanese and I did fine, did really, really well. You must speak Japanese is not true. Tokyo has the best opportunities. Again, it's not true. Outside Japan, outside Tokyo, there's lots of opportunities. The TEFL there is temporary. No, not true. As I've proven, as I've said, you can go work there for a long time. Now, the students are passive. That there's an element of truth that I would say though that they just sort of are used to having an education system where they are passive. What they tend to want is someone to bring it out of them, and once you do bring it out of them, you build their confidence. You tend to find that they're not. People say to me it's too polite. You should see some Japanese people when they're not being polite. They are hilarious and they are great fun. When you first meet people, it's polite, but after that, it's not. Right, here are some of the companies that you need to research. Now, I'm not going to go into each one of these, but have a look at these, screenshot it, pause it, take a photo, whatever it might be. These companies are some of the companies that you can do some research on. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. The only one I have experience with all of these is Westgate, and I enjoyed working for them. These might also be perfectly fine, but some of these are the companies to look for. Here are some of the websites that are good for jobs. Our own website has some jobs in Japan, tefl.org/TEFL-jobs-center. If you also go to our website, tefl.org, you will see at the top a section on jobs. ESL Cafe, that's how I got my first job in Japan. Gaijin Pop Jobs. Again, if you just type these into a search engine, you'll find these. Jobs in Japan. Sensei Jobs. Sensei is a Japanese word for teacher. Career Engine also has some jobs. Now, these aren't with one company. These are what companies advertise on. You can also just look in on the JET program website. That is a specific website just to go and do the JET program. Some of my final thoughts till I get to these great questions. Japan is a great first TEFL destination. If you're a little bit worried about safety, if you're a little bit anxious about teaching your first classes, there's lots of help for that. Japan is great for that. Do some research into what you want from a job, what you want from a location. Do you want to teach kids? Are you happy to teach all different types of ages? Do you want to necessarily be in Tokyo, or have you thought about some other locations as well? People think Japan is expensive, and Japan can be expensive. Hotels are super expensive, but things like Airbnbs are really cheap in Japan. Don't worry too much about the money. Your wage will get you through the month. You will not be poor. You will not, by the end of the month, have no money unless you are out spending time in Michelin-starred restaurants, that kind of thing. If you live like a general, everyday, normal person, your wage will go far in Japan. There is a lot of influencer talk about Japan. Japan is spoken a lot about on YouTube, Instagram, different social medias, and I think a lot of it is not true. It's there just to sort of shock you, or to get you to like, or to click, or to comment. Look at different influencers and don't go for the ones that are in the extremes of how expensive things or how cheap things are. Just don't fall for it. Do go into working in Japan, and do go into researching about Japan with an open mind. Sort of don't think that what your assumptions you have are true, because they're probably not. Thank you. I hope you're all still with me, and I hope that you are enjoyed that. So if you do have any questions, if you do have any comments, please do talk. Please put it in the chat. Right. So David he's saying he wants to know a bit more about workplace culture. So, right, what I would say about workplace culture is you will get places in Japan that are run by Americans, British people, Australians, whatever it might be, as in sort of the boss is from that. And workplace cultures generally amongst English speaking countries are generally similar. So just don't expect it to be crazy different. However, there are places where if there's sort of majority Japanese run, all the companies are probably Japanese owned, but Japanese run, as in the bosses are Japanese, then you will be expected to sort of follow some Japanese norms that they have in business culture, in terms of just maybe working a bit later. I had a job where I had to clock in as a teacher and clock out as a teacher. I've never had that before, apart from when I worked for this one Japanese company. So just be open-minded, but just be aware that it'd be quite different working for a Japanese person boss as compared to an Australian British boss. Okay. Student behavior is different depending on whether you're teaching kids or whether you're teaching adults, for sure. Also, if you're going to be an assistant language teacher, the way they behave will be different. If you have a Japanese person in the room with you, teach a Japanese teacher in the room with you, or if you're teaching that class by yourself. And the other thing to be aware of student behavior is that at the start, no matter what happens, they are going to be quiet. They are going to be quite shy. Your job there is to get that out of them, I think, as an EFL teacher. Okay. But don't, just do more research into that, David. Yeah. Hello to everyone that's saying hello. Avery, how to get started, where and when to apply, best places, schools to base. Great. So I answered that, I think, in the webinar, which is getting on the slides. But how do you get started? First of all, you need to get your 120-hour TEFL certificate. While you're doing that, look at jobs that are advertised, see if you match up with those, see if those are any of the ones you want to go to. Think about the best times. Now, the best places really does depend on you. You can't really go wrong with Tokyo, but you will find there's more competition for jobs there. If you go do something like the JET program, you might find that you have no choice about where you go. So the best place, I think any of the general top 5 biggest cities are great places to go if you want to be in a city. If you want to be a bit more rural, then you can go for it. But generally, I think the cities you can't go wrong with. Schools, I don't really want to give a school because it does depend on sort of your qualifications. It does depend on who you want to teach. But have a look at all of those ones I listed, see if any of those are interesting to you. David, what worries you about Japan? I imagine the reserved nature of the Japanese can make Japan a lonely place to live. Right. So this is a really good point. I think working in Tokyo. Right. No, I'm going to start something different. Right. You probably will not be the only teacher at the school that you go and get placed in, or the school that you apply for. There will probably be other, foreign teachers working there. So first of all, they tend to be a good source of hopefully friendship. Now, not necessarily, because they might have they might have families, they might have lived there for 5 or 10 years, they don't really maybe want to go out for a beer or not, but it tends to be, I would say, that you would make friends. And I have made friends in every staff room I've ever worked in. Okay, so I think that's the first thing. I think it can be harder to find local Japanese friends. And the reason being is because if you're a single guy or a single girl going over there, and that's what a lot of EFL teachers are. Now, you can take your families, but a lot of EFL teachers do go over the around. The local Japanese people will probably have families. They will have, quite stressful jobs. They don't necessarily have time to make friends outside of the classroom. That's the first thing. Second thing I would say is I do think wherever you go in the world, it's harder in a bigger city. If you're in a smaller place or a local place, you will find groups that you can find, and the internet makes this a lot easier. Facebook, that kind of thing, you can find groups on it. But I agree with you. I think it can be tricky, but I do believe it's sort of kind of up to you. But what I would say is that if this is the kind of thing that worries you the most, maybe look for companies that have a lot of teachers, because then you can find a lot of work. You can find a lot of friends out of that one. Chow, hi, from Southern California. What are the typical school seasons? You mentioned every 4 months. To what extent? So the school terms do tend to work every 4 months, generally, like all the world. They tend to start in April. Their sort of big holiday is around March time. So the equivalent that we have sort of in the UK of our summer holidays, really. But they do, they get a fair amount of holiday. Be aware, if you're going to go work in a public school, you might need to go in on the holidays, even if you're not teaching. So just something to be aware of in Japan in your contract. To what extent are the students' conversation in English? Really, it's the number one problem with them. They might produce some great writing, they might produce some good reading material, but they can't necessarily have a conversation with you. And a lot of that comes down to their confidence. That's why you are there. So you have to build the confidence. And that's something like you would learn on a 120-hour TEFL certificate. But how does the program typically assign the age group to teach? If you go into work for a private company, you will find that you teach a lot of different ages. So, when I worked for the British Council, which is basically a private language school, I would teach kids. I had businessmen, I had business ladies. I had specific classes on general English. I had specific classes on IELTS. And then I also had sort of students that were in their sort of 70s or 80s who just wanted to learn a bit of English for a bit of fun, really. Now, if you go work for a company, you basically have no control over that. They will say to you, Chow, I've got this class, you're going to go teach this class. Now, in the interview, they should make you aware of the type of classes they have. So if you don't want to teach kids, find out in the interview, I'm not going to be teaching kids. Okay, I am. I don't want this job. Research the companies themselves, see what sort of students they have. You will probably find that if it's a private language school, they have kids classes, they have adults classes, and it's just generally luck when you get there. You don't really have any control over it yourself. And in terms of the JET program, again, you don't really have control of it. You will find that you might be teaching primary, you might be teaching high school. Okay, so generally you don't have much control over it. Avery, how does working in Japan compare to China or South Korea? Is traveling between countries easy while working? So these are Right, so China and Japan have had a bit of a falling out over the last month or so, and a lot of flights between China and Japan have been cancelled. So China and Japan can sometimes have political issues, and you find that, you know, people don't travel, the flights get cancelled. I've worked in China. I've not worked in South Korea. It is similar in some ways between China and Japan. The types of jobs you teach in terms of business English, in terms of teaching kids, teaching adults, the classes are similar. China doesn't tend to have the jobs in high schools that the jobs in Japan has. I don't think that I can think off the top of my head now, like a JET program equivalent in China. There is sort of in South Korea in different ways. Traveling between them is easy. Yeah, it's one of the easier places to go to in terms of flights, because there's a lot of them that run. There's a lot of, and because of that, it's a bit cheaper, because Japan can be one of the more expensive places to fly to. But yeah, traveling between countries is generally quite easy between the two of them. Okay. Thanks though. Good question. Does having a PhD qualify for anything one might not be aware of? So so you might be able to get jobs in universities in terms of lecturing if it's an English speaking university. There's not a huge amount of them in Japan. There are a lot more of them outside around the world. There's a lot more in China, universities that deliver their program in English. So you could go and work as a lecturer there. Japan, that will maybe help you long term to get into a university and teach civil environmental engineering. Won't necessarily help you straight away with getting a job out there. You still would probably need the 120-hour certificate, and then once you're there, just go for it. Chow, you've really caught me on the hop here. What is an example of that CQ-EQ? So I think there you're talking about sort of cultural intelligence and emotional intelligence. Yeah, cultural being CQ. So basically, sort of EQ is sort of being able to read the room quite well. So, and that's quite useful if you're sort of giving feedback to a student because they've made a mistake. And some students can take being told that they've made a mistake better than others, and how you do it with, calling them out in front of the class. That's, I probably shouldn't do it with most, but some will be able to take that more than others. So it's basically being able to read the room. Cultural intelligence, CQ, is more about just sort of generally knowing about what's happening in the whole of the classroom and knowing what they've been through before in terms of the teachers and what they're sort of what they are used to as a group, and you coming in there and sort of changing the way to try and improve their language speaking abilities. However, I'm sure there are really, lots of email, a lot of websites on that talk a lot about this more than I have done. Okay. Another question, Chow. Thanks for all these questions. You mentioned something about a program you started with that began with W, Westgate. I think that probably was. And TEFL org is a general certificate. So we help people to become teachers, EFL teachers in wherever they want to go around the world. We are not linked to one company. We do not have schools abroad. We are accredited to help people to become EFL teachers. Once you've got that certificate, you can go teach in Korea, you could go teach in Japan, you could go teach in Latin America, you could go teach in Europe, wherever it might be. Each country has different requirements. And yes, we do. If you do your 120-hour TEFL certificate with us, we will help you with things like the application process and stuff like that, as long as you just do it. Okay. Quarko, sorry if I said that name wrong. Is it easy for a person from an African country? Right. So in theory, yes, you can go work abroad. You can go work in Japan. Yeah, on a working holiday visa, as long as you hit the requirements of the 3-year degree and you speak English and you're the age requirements, that kind of thing. I just want to be honest with you. it can be trickier for African countries. I don't think you can get a working holiday visa, for example, if you've got an African passport. But you know, if unfortunately, if you have exactly the same level of qualification as someone with a British passport, and maybe you've even got a higher sort of TEFL level in terms of experience and that kind of thing, they might take the British passport over your African passport. But I do know African people that have gone to Japan and worked. You might need to, you know, think outside, not working in Tokyo. You might need to take the sort of jobs that people don't want to do. And then once you're there, you're fine. You will be able to sort of move around a bit, do a bit of work. Look, it's just honesty from me. Okay. Is it right? Of course not. But it's just generally what happens. Okay. Hi, Sir Law from South Africa. One question about the TEFL. Does it matter where one gets the certificate? Which is right. So I recommend, first of all, our website, our agency, TEFL.org. We are accredited by lots of different companies. That means outside bodies have checked our courses, have checked people like me to make sure that you make sure that our certificates are good quality and that you become a good level of EFL teacher. However, there are other companies out there. You will find TEFL certificates that are cheaper than us. What I would say to you is think about the teacher that you would want teaching you. Would you want somebody who has just learned how to be a teacher for a day? Or would you want someone that spent a lot of time, had to do exams, had to, you know, read lots of videos, and the qualification is of good quality? Look into it yourself, okay? The other thing to be aware of is that some companies' certificates are linked to specific teaching companies. So you might find a cheap certificate that will then allow you to go teach for a company, let's say in Thailand. But once you finish that year in Thailand or wherever it might be, you then might find that you can't use that certificate to go work in Japan because it's not a general all-round certificate. It's a certificate that is linked from one company to one teaching EFL company to a school somewhere. Okay, so just be aware of that. Supan Ganguly, do schools recruit directly in Japan? Yes, they do, or through recruitment agencies. Both. Probably go directly to Japan. Go directly to a school, generally if you can, but recruitment agencies also work. Those ALT jobs can work through recruitment agencies. Now, I'm not going to show this next one, but somebody asked me about the criminal background checks, and yes, that could stop you getting a job there. Okay. But what I would say is make sure you tell them in the interview process that this is the situation. Okay. Last question, Sybil. Hi. In my experience, the older age factor a significant hurdle in many other countries for teaching classes versus online. I've been in Highlands. I bet it's right up there. I love the Highlands. I did the North Coast 500 the other year. It was beautiful. Right. Age. I think generally it's easier to get an online job if you are at the more mature age of your working life. Online companies tend to not care so much about online jobs as they do about face-to-face jobs. Now, the reason companies don't really want necessarily people that are a little bit older, one is that it can cost them more in insurance, and two, generally, not always, but generally, as you get older, you have a few more illnesses, you have a bit of sickness, and that can cause companies some issues. They feel like it can cause some issues. So because of that, they do tend to have sort of an upper ceiling that they work for. But don't let that put you off, Sybil. If you want to go work in Japan and you're 52, 53, apply. Why not? You can find work out there for sure. And Middle East tends to not have that upper limit. So, if you're sort of 60, I've worked with 70-year-olds in the Middle East that can work pretty well out that way. Okay. So don't let it put you off, but generally I think online is better it's generally better for more mature people than more age mature people than, because I know quite a lot of immature older people, than working face to face. One more question, which was Avery. I don't think I answered to you. What kind of 3 to 4 month opportunities are there, and how do they compare to year-long opportunities? You'll find a lot more year-long opportunities than you will 3 to 4 month opportunities. Lots of schools around the world, this isn't necessarily a Japan thing. They don't, because it costs a lot of money for them to fly you out there. It costs them a lot of money to set you up in the accommodation, to set up your visa process. And if you're only going to be there for 3 months, the company doesn't tend to have it get its money back. Westgate, the one I work for, is pretty good for 3 or 4 month opportunity. But you will see a lot more choice if you're prepared to sign up for a year. You won't see a huge amount of 3 to 4 month opportunities. Generally, I don't know where you are in the world, Avery, but 3 to 4 month opportunities tend to work best in Europe if you have an EU passport. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. I rattled on there for 57 minutes. I hope I answered your question. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. If you are not watching this live, if you do put in the comments any questions, we have social media people that go through and look at the videos, especially on YouTube, and that can go in and answer your question. Okay. If you've got other questions, you want to email us directly, go to our website, tefl.org, go on our website, go on our contact us function. Also, we have a Facebook group. If you do a search for TEFL org in that, you will see there's lots of students, lots of graduates. I'm on that group a lot as well. There's lots of ways. On our website, tefl.org, we have lots of links to podcasts. We have lots of links to blog pages, all that kind of thing that hopefully you will find useful. Thank you very much. Please do like us. Please do follow us. We've done loads of these videos. On our YouTube page, you will find loads of videos on a range of different topics. Please go and have a look at some of them. Please do like us. And please also let us know if you didn't enjoy them, because we always love a bit of feedback. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye-bye.